I like to create spaces that are as much for the audience as it is for the performer. It feels really ridiculous for me to ignore the fact that there are people in space with us, especially when I've invited you here. Check.
I know.
1, 2, call. Imagine. That's the interview. My name is Rudi Goblen. I am a writer, a dancer, an actor, playwright, poet, performer.
And my name is Teo Castellanos. I'm a writer, director, and still sometimes an actor.
Mm-hmm. What sparked this story, and how does FITO add a dimension to your body of work? I'm thinking specifically about Little Boy, Little Man, in which there is a FITO.
Yeah, absolutely. Little Boy, Little Man came first. I wrote that play in 2017 when I was applying to the Yale School of Drama for the playwriting program. And if you know Little Boy, Little Man, not to give away secrets or whatever, it ends in a very specific way, FITO being affected in a very particular way. And so when I got the chance to create a new work and play around with some ideas, I had always been thinking about like, oh, what if Little Boy, Little Man didn't end that way? What if FITO got the opportunity to become a citizen? Because in Little Boy, Little Man, he is just a legal resident. He has a green card. His brother wants to become a citizen, but he doesn't. And so I was like, what would that day feel like for FITO? What would that be? And so I got infatuated with that question, and so I wrote this piece. So it's the day of FITO's naturalization ceremony, and he's about to, do the oath of allegiance. And when he raises his hand to do so, he's snapped back into the last 30 years of his life in this country. And, you see what he goes through. He gets harassed by cops. He's getting pulled over. He thinks about all the things that his mother and grandmother went through. He thinks of, he has that poem where it's kind of like his manifesto. This is who I am. This is what I feel. This is what I like. But this is how people perceive me. FITO in Little Boy, Little Man is a poet. He's a street performer. I just ran with the kind of heightened language or the poetics, and that's how this piece came about. And if I may, can I give a shout out to the Shed FITO? The first version of FITO happened in 2019. It was commissioned by the Fisher Center at Bard by Tanya Alcuri and Gideon Lester, and I've been trying to put this show up since and been sending it to everybody. And the Shed was the only people in amount of 7 years that were like, hey, we want this. We love this. I think we all know as artists, it's hard to, do the thing that we do. And so when you find somebody who is like, yeah, I see you. I see what you're doing. I see what you're trying to do, and we want to be part of that. It's a beautiful thing. And so, to finally land a spot in New York that fucks with us, is great. Is beautiful and is great. And
if it were up to you, what would it take to join a nation?
As a Puerto Rican born in Puerto Rico, I was born an American citizen. However, let's be very clear that it is a second class citizenship, and on so many levels. If you live on an island, you cannot vote for the president, who can send you to war, and who we all have gone to war for the U.S. From 1 to Korea, Vietnam, and all the wars that have ensued post. Why are Black and brown people in the military? Because we see it as our only way out, and many times it is. I'm gonna be real. Many times it is, and blessed be those who have made it out through and have risen above. I'm not even getting into the experimentations done, the medical experiments done, the sterilization of women in Puerto Rico. But it is a second class citizenship. So that oath, I don't even know what to think about that. You got something?
No. I don't know if I have an answer, but I do have two things that are coming to mind. My mother became an American citizen right before she passed. And my mother was 68, I believe, when she became an American citizen. She had been diagnosed with Parkinson's right around the same time. And I'm mentioning all of that to age and sickness, or health, because when she went in to get her citizenship, they ask you 3 questions. You have to study like a litany of questions, like 100 questions, but they only ask you 3 out of the 100, right? One of the questions that they asked her was, if America got into a war, World War III or something happened, would you go to war and fight for this country? And they asked her that in Spanish. And my mom's hella funny. My mom, because she was trying to get the citizenship, so she was like, in Spanish, she was like, "Hasta la muerte," which to the death. My mom's she was like, "I'm gonna get this citizenship." Yeah, she was like, to the death. And I was like, man, what the fuck? Why are y'all asking a 68-year-old woman with Parkinson's? It. And I guess it's just like the ridiculousness of it, right? Of like that. You saying this and promising this is proof that you deserve a thing, to be or to be dignified, or to be honored, or to be accepted, or to be identified as someone who is part of our community. And I think for me, the second thing I'm thinking about is community. I'm gonna go like bell hooks right now, but like I think it's not about individualism. I think it's about community. We are all in this together. Now, granted, you do have to take accountability for yourself to be part of the community, but that's the intention, is that you are taking accountability for yourself to be to show up as your best self for this community, and the greater good. The more we gather, the more we eat, the more we laugh, the more we talk, the more stories are shared. That's why we do what we do. That's why I'm trying to get moments for us to gather and not just live in this digital world or get caught up in the images and the stories that are being told to us by the powers that be.
Like while you all were having your production meeting, I was over there sitting by the monitor, so I couldn't hear you, but I could see you, and y'all were moving around, looking so comfy with each other. So Teo, could you talk a little bit about how long you've been working with Rudi?
Well, I've known Rudi since he was 23.
22.
22.
Yeah.
Since he was 22, he came. He auditioned for me. At the time, I was commissioned to write and direct a hip hop dance theater piece, and I held open auditions. And Rudi came through, and he had a spoken word monologue that he did, and I was like, wow! Not only was the delivery, beautiful and powerful, but the subject matter was actually what the show I was writing was about. And so not only did I cast him, he became a company member, and we used that monologue, that spoken word piece in the show. And well, I asked him, I'm going to put it in the show. Can you please send it to me? He was like, I don't have it. I said, what do you mean you don't have it? No, I don't have it. I said, well, didn't you write it down? He said, no, I wrote it in my head. Now, he didn't freestyle it. He wrote it in his head. Yeah. And he delivered it from his head. He never wrote it down. And then I made him write it down. And I believe that was the beginning of his career as a playwright. Yeah. That spoken word piece.
Oh my gosh. Putting that to paper instead of keeping it here.
Yeah.
What parts of this project called you into collaboration?
We are an artistic family. We know each other's language, how we work. There's a certain lineage there. I felt, in all honesty, I told Rudi this the other day. I said, I don't feel like I directed much this piece because his vision was so focused, so tight, so probably knew exactly what he wanted. And then I realized that I think I've been directing this piece for 20 something years. I think that's when I directed this piece. Not this last week.
Yeah, all this time.
Yeah, it's a lot of time that we've cultivated, working together, an aesthetic, like I said, we're an artistic family. So it's like when we come together, it's like, yes, bam, 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 bam. We know exactly where we're going. We can articulate our visions to each other real easily because of our experience of working and creating devised work together. Because that's also been our history, has been devising work. Yes.
So in this artistic family, is it brother, cousin, uncle, father?
As father, mentor, director. Yeah.
It's father son. It's father son.
It is. And if I can add to that, that question, Teo is also my first teacher as a theater artist. Prior to Teo, I was a spoken word artist, a breaker, an MC, very much in the hip hop world, a street performer. So, I didn't even know I was auditioning to get into a theater company. I thought I was auditioning for a gig. So when they called me then, a few days later and they're like, hey, we want to offer you a spot in the theater company. I was like, oh, what? and I fell in love with theater because a couple things. One, it was a space, a container that could hold all the things that I did as an artist. I was like, oh, I could rhyme, I could break, I could do music, I could play music, I could perform, and to tell a story. And two, Teo was that very kind of artist. And also it was the way that he was working. He was taking elements and ingredients that were inspiring him and encouraging him and motivating him at the time, per piece, per process, per episode in his life, and then taking those things and interrogating them and exploring and seeing what comes out of it. And that, for me as an artist who was always trying to and as someone who has ADHD and gets bored very quickly, I was just like, what else is there? You know what I mean? Like, what else is there? And so I fell in love with it. And and so I was just like, anything Teo was giving me, I was like, yes. And I wanted more and more of it. I thought, because this was my first experience with theater, that this is what theater was. And I was like, oh. And then I went into these spaces where I was like, oh, regional theater, or the word theater means very different things to specific people and specific spaces. And so it was funny because I would encounter theater folk and they'd be like, oh, Chekhov or Rent or whatever. And I'd be like, what? I just had a whole totally...
You're like, where is Teo?
I just had a whole totally different experience because Teo was feeding us everything from Peter Brook to Pina Bausch to Buto to West African dance to Zulu warrior war rituals to, we from poetry to music to punk, we were taking all these elements. And for me, that's what helped me realize that as a breaker, as an MC, as a spoken word artist, as a poet, as a street performer, as a cabaret burlesque host, I was already doing theater prior, or telling stories with my family around the table, or at parties and music was playing and we were telling tales that I was part of that community already. It just wasn't, it's not Western theater,
if I may just add to, and that clearly reflects in this show. I mean, it's everything he just said is clearly reflected in the show. I also want to add to that it is a total attempt, initiative to reclaim what theater is. And I'm going to use the word decolonize theater. I know it's a catchword.
I like that word.
Yes.
That's okay.
Good. Because it is. It's absolutely decolonizing the idea of what theater is, what the Western theater structures, what we're taught. And that came totally from my experience of being in college in a theater department and going, I don't see any of my people here. I got questions asked now, can you drop your can you lose your accent? Instead of could you do this accent? Do you think you could do this accent or whatever? And productions that had nothing to do with my life. So from then on, I began actually decolonizing theater before I knew I was decolonizing theater. In college, when I said I'm only going to do plays by Puerto Rican playwrights, and then it's been that my entire career.
Getting into Teo's company, the company's called Teo Castellanos D Projects, and it was an all-male company, a company of black and brown young men, and Teo would always mention when people are like, oh, why is it an all-male company? And he's like, because young black and brown men need a space to be vulnerable amongst each other. And so that was the first time that I was also experiencing that kind of encouragement and that kind of like space, or given that kind of like space and to be that. And again, this is what 2002, like when them conversations was not happening.
Nobody was having. I would love to know a little bit more about the intention behind the circle.
For me, as a b-boy, as an MC, the cipher has always been a thing. We believe that the circle is where storytelling in theater first started, right? We gather around the fire, right? Some music is playing, some stories are told. The village shares, right? There's a moral of the story, or there's like an intention or an oral history that's being taught. I personally like circles because also you have to now look at the person across from you, and so you have to also look at the person on stage. I'm seeing you, I'm watching you, you're watching me, I'm watching you watch me, and that makes you lean in a different way, right? And for me, that was the first form of theater. I think that's how it started, and then it got broken up and split up, and then there's this big gap that has been created between like audience and performer. I like to create spaces that are as much for the audience as it is for the performer. It feels really ridiculous for me to ignore the fact that there are people in space with us, especially when I've invited you here. Especially when you live in New York and I'm making you take an hour-long train to come here. I'm just going to pretend not to see you and make you pay $300, like, or whatever. And some people like that kind of theater. I personally like a kind of theater that involves everyone in the space creating the experience, having the experience together.
It's the act of decolonizing, right? The proscenium theater, to breaking the fourth wall, going back to the communal, going back to our ancestral practices way before the Greeks. And no tea, no shade on the Greeks, because actually they need to decolonize the Greeks as well, because it is forgotten all the knowledge and exchange that was happening between Greece and North Africa, Egypt and Sudan, right? And all that was happening, but that totally got whitewashed in theater programs. Oh, here we are. And the Greeks, and they were outstanding, they were fascinating, and then we went to the Dark Ages and the Renaissance and Shakespeare, and so I'm trying to go back to the griots and the shamans of our ancestors, which is where this intentional theater took space, right? Where there was a purpose, as Rudi mentioned, where there was the passing down of history, of wisdom, knowledge, of lessons, and even healing. That was my interest. I didn't learn how to direct and around in college, right? I taught myself how to direct. I just looked inside, looked at my DNA and my ancestors, and said, okay, we got this.
No, for real. And you see it in the community, right? When we gather around food, we gather at a party, we gather at the house, to play, to talk, to whatever, to eat, to share stories. Like it's always like theater's always happening. You know what I mean? Like, I know we all got them funny ass relative, and that's what I'm saying, and that's what it's about. Again, going back to community, and now we're in community, and that feels great to word. Thank you for doing this. I appreciate it.